Okay, today we're going beyond propositional logic. Propositional logic can help us establish the validity of arguments whose validity depends on truth functional connectives such as not, and, or, if then, etc. Nevertheless, there are cases in which validity does not depend on the propositional connectives. So, for instance, take an argument such as violets are blue and roses are red. Therefore, violets are blue. Well, this is not very exciting, but it's valid. And this can be shown in two steps with the help of propositional logic. First, we can see that our argument is an instance of the argument form on the left, since both its premises and conclusion fit the premises and conclusion of the form. Second, we can use a truth table to show that it's impossible for the premise to be true and the conclusion to be false. So the argument is valid. The same reasoning would go with an argument such as violets are blue, first premise, second premise, roses are red. Therefore, violets are blue and roses are red. It's also valid because it instantiates the form to the right. However, there are cases in which validity does not depend on the propositional connectives. For example, take these two arguments. The first one is, Al plays guitar, therefore someone plays guitar. And the other one is, all Welshmen are Britons, all Britons are Europeans, therefore all Welshmen are Europeans. So intuitively, these are valid arguments. But can propositional logic show that they are valid? To see whether it does, the first step would be to determine the forms that are instantiated by the premises and the conclusion of the argument in question. Okay, let's take the first argument. So, which argument form does it instantiate? So, for instance, which form does the conclusion instantiate, and which form does the premise instantiate? Well, notice that neither of them has any connective such as and, or, not, if then, so that from the point of view of propositional logic, both are atomic sentences, right? So the argument would be of the form P, therefore Q. Is this form valid? No, clearly it isn't, because it is quite possible for the premise to be true and the conclusion to be false. Just look at row 2 in your truth table. And the same goes for the other argument. Again, none of the sentences has any connectives, so all of them are atomic. So the form of the argument would be first premise P, second premise Q, therefore R. Now compare this argument, which was valid, to another argument that is invalid. For instance, some Welshmen are Britons, some Britons are Europeans, therefore all Welshmen are Europeans. Well, this argument is clearly invalid. Nevertheless, both arguments, as far as propositional logic is concerned, would have the same form. P, Q, therefore R. Therefore, in propositional logic, we can't distinguish between certain valid or invalid forms of argument. So propositional logic, while it works very well for a certain material, has its limitations. Let's see more closely to see why, in particular, propositional logic fails at detecting validity in this case. Okay, on what does the validity of this argument depend? Well, the first factor is, well, it depends on whether there are terms in common between the premises, right? And between some of the premises and the conclusions. In this case, you have that between premise 1 and 2, you have a common term, which is Britons. Moreover, the term Welshman appears in the conclusion and also in one of the premises, particularly the first one. Finally, Europeans appears in the second premise and in the conclusion. Validity also depends on which words modify the terms in the argument. Right? In this case, we have all in the first premise and all in the second premise, and all in the conclusion, right? So all of the statements here begin with the word all. Words such as all, some, most are called quantifiers. So that you can see that quantifiers matter to the validity of the argument, substitute all the occurrences of all in the premises with some. So we would have some Welshmen are Britons, some Britons are Europeans, and the conclusion would be all Welshmen are Europeans. Now this argument is invalid, so validity depends in part on the quantifiers. So propositional logic only deals with relations among sentences, as determined by the connective, right? However, we saw that in these arguments, the validity depends on terms and quantifiers, but these are internal to the sentence, right? And propositional logic does not allow us to look into the sentence, but only into the relationships between the sentences. So for many kinds of arguments, such as those whose validity depends on the quantifiers that occur in them, we have to go beyond propositional logic. In the next few lectures, we're going to be exploring a logic that can deal with some quantifiers, and is called categorical logic.